Okay, we're about to go live. If there is anyone who, okay. So just a reminder that this is going to be all public and the event is also recorded. It will also be uploaded onto various social media platforms. So if there is any issue with if there are any security issues, please feel free to change your name and turn off your camera. We will be starting shortly in 1 minute. Any issue with, if there are any security issues, please feel free to change your name and turn off your camera. Okay. My apologies, that was from my side. Okay, it's now time for us to begin. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the Rohingya Women webinar series. With this series 2020, we are exploring the topic of resistance and resilience in reclaiming narratives and reclaiming power. In this series, we will also explore powerful stories, inspiration, and resilience of women whose works have been vital to the betterment of Rohingya and Myanmar Burma society. So in commemoration of resistance movement for freedom and democracy like the 888 Uprising, as well as the Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day on August 25th, we cannot forget that women have been fundamental movers and shakers in all the past and present resistance movements. It is important that their voice, their stories, and their strength are celebrated. My name is Yasmin Ullah. I am a Rohingya human rights activist who will be your host today. Firstly, let me thank you all for joining us on this call, as well as those who have joined us via Facebook. This is a reminder that this is a public event and we'll be recording a session and upload this video onto various social media platforms later on. This is the first of many webinars throughout the entirety of August, where we will be interacting, exploring, and discussing different social issues facing women of Myanmar Burma. So please stay tuned until the end, where I'll be informing you of our next two speakers for next week. Before I introduce you to our special guest today, I would like to remind everyone who have joined us on Zoom to please mute yourself throughout the webinar until the question and answer session. If there are any burning questions you would like answered, please feel free to drop them in the chat box and I will be sure to ask them for you. You can also tweet us at #Rohingya-women-webinar during the session, as well as tweeting the speakers here using the following handles, and it was already shared on the chat. Furthermore, please make sure that you use #Rohingya-women, #resistance, #resilience, if that's so that we can actually, so that your tweets can be linked to today's webinar. So our first speaker is a very, very inspiring advocate and a friend of mine, Noor Azizah. Before we begin, let me quickly introduce her. And Noor is a 26-year-old former Rohingya refugee. She resettled with her family in Sydney in 2003 at the age of 8, fleeing the atrocities happening in Rakhine State of Myanmar. She has a Bachelor of Education from University of Sydney. Noor Azizah is a refugee delegate at the United Nations in Geneva, where she also spoke at the Global Refugee Forum in 2019 as a keynote speaker advocating for Rohingya women. She is a part of the gender audit team at UNSW and UNHCR. She's a member of the APCR Refugee Steering Group, my apologies, part of the annual tripartite consultation on resettlement at the UNHCR. She's on the Young Migrant and Refugee Women's Advisory Board for Harmony Alliance. She's also on the Youth Advisory Board for the US Consulate in Sydney. And lastly, she's part of the International Rohingya Women's Network for Fortify Rights. She is extremely passionate about the rights of children and women to receive education. She's currently working as an English as a second dialect teacher at the primary school in Sydney. She loves languages, traveling, culture, and going on waterfall adventures. Welcome, Noor, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sister Yasmin, for that really lovely introduction, and thank you for having me here. It's really a pleasure to speak to you, and really nice to even start the morning like this.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to have you. Um, Let us begin with the first question. I am curious about your own story and what was your journey like from Rakhine State to Australia?
So our journey started in Myanmar with my two older brother and two older sister and my parents, and I was just a baby, and things were not good for us in Mangdor, and it wasn't safe for us. And my family and I, we decided to flee Myanmar and reach for safety. The journey from Myanmar to Australia obviously was not a very safe journey. We made our way by foot, by train, by bus, by the help of many communities in the neighbouring countries, and we ended up in Malaysia. And in Malaysia, it was not safe. We were usually hungry. We were usually begging for food. And we have to thank a lot of communities that helped us throughout this journey. But in 2003, Australia granted us asylum and we were able to come to Australia in October. And that feeling of safety is something that I'll never forget as a 9-year-old child, and even landing in Australian soil and seeing my parents' reaction is something that I will never forget in my mind. So our journey to Australia was not a safe one, but it was something that we needed to do, and it was something that our family wanted to sacrifice in order to find safety and also finding a citizenship eventually. This is what we wanted, finding citizenship, education, a sense of identity, and being able to also practice our own culture and speak our own language. This was something we were so afraid of doing, even throughout our journey to Australia. Even in Malaysia, we were so afraid to say that we were Rohingya, but now in Australia, because we have that safety, we're able to proudly say, I am a Rohingya and I can tell you about my culture. I can share with you about my language. So this is something I'm really proud of, that I'm able to practice my culture and I'm able to share that knowledge with other people over here.
Well, I'm almost tearing up just hearing your first answer. I'm not sure if I'm going to be crying full blown at the end of this session.
Don't cry, because I cry when I see people crying.
That would be a disaster. I definitely relate to all of your experience. I think that we communally share this, as the entire community probably go through this. At least for those of us who are fortunate enough to find safety or to find a third or a fourth home. Let me ask this next question. Why did you decide to become an educator? Why is it so important?
So I only received formal education in year 3, and in grade 3 in Australia, that's the age of 9. So that's quite late for someone to start schooling. I had to learn to speak English, I had to learn how to write English, and I was also learning about my own identity, because we had to hide the fact that we were Rohingya people, and eventually I had to learn about my own culture and learn about my own history as a child. That was also so, I guess, blurry to me in my mind. So having that formal education in year 3, where I only had 3 more years until high school, and then I had 6 more years until university. And having that personal story made me realise that there are so many women in our community that are at camps that don't have formal education, that don't receive the formal education. So I thought I needed to be a teacher in order to make these little changes, in order to be an advocate. I didn't want to be an advocate without knowing how to be a teacher, without knowing how to teach. And I also wanted to show other Rohingya girls and other Rohingya women that they can be a teacher, that they can also educate others, they can also be someone that they wanted to be. So right now, becoming a teacher and having that couple of years experience, I'm able to utilise my teaching skills and my advocacy skills and mash that together and utilize that to make little changes. It doesn't even have to be big changes. It could be little conversations in your workplace or in your community, and educating people about the Rohingya genocide. Essentially, a lot of people don't know and don't understand that there's an ongoing genocide and that this is happening. People often say, oh, what's Rohingya? Like, what is this? And I think having been educated and becoming a teacher, I was able to also use my voice to show people what being a Rohingya means, and also the historical point of view.
Right. I guess we all have our own journey in trying to come to terms with how do we, put this out in the world, and trying to explain to people that there's a huge problem that, the entire world needs to pay attention to. Following up with that, from that question, what is the most important thing about education in helping us resist against the tide of injustices? And why should it be considered a human right? What are we missing that some people are still unsure about educating refugees, especially policymakers?
So accessing education is a basic fundamental human right. And this is something that a lot of refugees don't have, and a lot of refugee girls and women don't have. And having education allows us to tackle other human rights issues, such as access to housing, access to freedom to movement. And it also allows us to feel empowered and confident about ourselves. And having the privilege to be educated, I'm able to use the voices of women at camps to make it heard over here. And having an education also helps people tackle and improve their own lifestyle. And it also breaks the poverty cycle. And going back to your question, it was a big question. I have to think about it.
It is a huge question.
Yeah. So there are so many inequalities for women. So let's focus on women. There are lots of inequalities for women in education. For example, a woman at camp can stop going to school because they don't have menstrual items. They don't have enough sanitary items. And this is something that's shameful. They can't be walking around if they don't have enough sanitary items. And for policymakers, it's really important to understand the intersectionality of women. There are women that are older, there are women that are disabled, there are women that identify as LGBTIQ, and there's many more different types of women. We don't come under just one umbrella. And as policymakers, we need to be able to identify these intersectionalities, and we need to be able to have this meaningful refugee participation where we need to use their voices in order to create our policies. We can't just say, let's take our Rohingya women at camp, let's speak to her. We need to speak to many different types of women at camp. We need to speak to different types of women in order to achieve policy goals. We don't just come under one umbrella. That's one of my biggest things that I'd like to share with policymakers.
Right. And just to go back a little bit to our question earlier, why is education such an important part of resisting against injustices? Why is it that we might not have an effective way to resist if education is not a main element of it?
Yeah, like I said, education breaks the poverty cycle, and it really changes people. And for us to receive education, I've had the privilege to receive education. That's a very privileged thing to have. Mm-hmm. And it's changed me. I can have a stronger voice and I can have more opinions. And I think women need to be at the center of the table. We need to be the decision makers. Mm. We need to be in the front of decision making and policy making.
Right. I obviously I cannot agree more. I think that at least for myself, I know that at the beginning of my advocacy, it was extremely difficult, not knowing the language that is spoken at these, decision-making tables. And I often am just so unsure. I used to be very, very unsure of what to say, even though, we have all this lived experience. We don't necessarily have a way to express it. And it's a very classist thing, unfortunately, for us to have to go through that rigorous training or educating ourselves on basically what kind of language is spoken in that circle. It's kind of exclusive in a way, but I see your point that without being able to equip ourselves with that tool, it is going to be difficult for us to relay those messages that we need them to change something for us to be able to live better. And poverty is such an important topic to talk about, because if we're just thinking about survival, which is a really huge problem that our community is facing right now, especially those who are living in the refugee camps in Bangladesh and in the region in Southeast Asia. If survival is the only thing that you can think of, there's barely anything else that you could actually explore, right? So not even to talk about resisting, because finding food and water, or very, very rudimentary element of living is needed to be prioritized first. Let's change up the subject a little bit. I really appreciate all of your answers, and those are answered with a lot of candor. Here's another question. Who was your biggest role model? Who inspired you to become this unapologetic and so powerful in advocacy and all other works that you do?
There's been a lot of women that's inspired me throughout my life. There's a lot of people that inspire me throughout my life, even on an everyday basis. People in communities, people that I see on social media, and you're one of my inspirations too. And I can say that my mum and my sisters are my inspirations. I've seen them go through really, really, really big struggles in life. My mum was a mother of 5 and fleeing Myanmar and ending up in Malaysia. There were times where she needed to seek assistance for me to even drink milk as a child. And the strength I saw in her was something that I've never seen in my life. And and this is something I'll never forget, and I'll always think about her.
Well, I'm not sure if we're continuing to talk about this topic. I think I will be tearing up eventually. It'll become a tear-flooded session, but we're going to move on to the next question. I think that our mothers have done incredible job in creating an environment and helping us, uplifting us in our lives. Very similarly, at least this is what I have observed in a lot of Rohingya families. Daughters are usually get to draw inspiration from their mothers or from those who are around them, relatives and whatnot. And Rohingya women are a different, type of women. We are very, very resilient, and hence why the title of our webinar today. So Rohingya women who are refugees usually face a lot more barriers and are further discriminated against or disenfranchised than men. What are your thoughts on this as a long-term Rohingya advocate?
I think a lot of the voices of men are heard when it comes to policy making, which is why we need people like you and people like me to speak up and show other Rohingya girls that you can speak up, you can also be in the forefront of your community, and you can also assist your community. And in terms of peace work and human rights work, I think there is much needed work in decolonizing that area. And I've been doing a lot of work with the ATCR on meaningful refugee participation. We want to move forward from storytelling, and we want to be part of this decision-making process. We need more people to take part of this initiative where we want the participation to be meaningful, not just speak on a panel once or twice and then forget about it, but we want to be part of that decision-making process. And we also want to be paid for this. We are the people that lived for these moments. You know, there's been times where people have asked a lot of human rights activists to speak and they do it, and it sort of becomes tokenistic. I think we want to move forward to that and make it become really meaningful.
Mm-hmm. How do you cope? I'm pretty sure, you know, when you're doing a lot of this work, as you actually just alluded to right now, there are a lot of challenges that we face as an advocate, and not to mention that we also carry a lot of trauma from our own community, be it whether or not we actually face those atrocities ourselves. How do you cope when it comes to the challenges that, you know, as a woman of color, intersecting with being from a community facing genocide, and so many other, you know, socially identifiable struggles? What message do you have for young women who will be watching and you know, hoping to build themselves up? Hopefully they, you know, they'll look up to you, you know, to try and be as inspiring as you are in their own rights. What message do you have for them, and how, like, can you share with us, you know, how do you cope when it comes to all these different challenges?
Yeah. In terms of challenges, I think it's really important to find people, whether in your community or in other refugee communities, or it doesn't even have to be refugee communities, to find people that are going to support you throughout your advocacy. You should find like-minded people and build yourself up through that, and find a support network. Join a group that are refugee advocates and make sure that you follow up, and find people that are going to assist you and move you forward, and collaborate your ideas with them. And this is something that I've done from years and years ago, and this is something I've done with you. We've been collaborating. So this is a perfect example of what young refugees, especially girls, can do, is find people that are going to help you and collaborate, because this is going to really help you throughout your advocacy. And if it's safe for you to do so, and you are in a safe country and you have the safety, use your privilege to make sure that voices of refugees at camp that are living the horrendous camp life, and use their stories and speak about their crisis. Contact them, find organisations that are able to contact them and hear out their issues, hear out what they need, hear out what they need in order to move forward, whether your interest is in education, whether your interest is in other fields. Find organisations and people that are going to support you and help you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there is a saying, I completely forgot who it's from, but there is a saying that we all need our tribes, especially as women. And I think that I really want to thank you for being part of my tribe, for helping me with a lot of things in the past. And I think that, you know, as we go through this life as not only survivors of, you know, tremendous and horrifying crimes, having the courage to speak up and you know, facing the challenges at the same time, not just, you know, for who you are as a woman, as a refugee, as a Rohingya. Like, we face so many different kind of challenges. I think that at some point, you know, as much as we don't want it to affect us, those challenges can become internalized, but they're not really the reflection of who we are. Sometimes it's more of our social positionality, something we're born into, or something that, you know, the society enforces on us. So having people around us to ground us in reality is incredibly important. Moving forward to our next question, and soon after this, we will probably open up the floor for people to start asking you questions. What can those in Australia and internationally do to support education for Rohingya children and women. What are your personal plea to policymakers and those who have decision-making power to change the reality of Rohingya children and women, and those who are within Myanmar as a whole?
Yeah, in terms of advocates that are living safely, I think it's important to use our privilege to notify policymakers about the Rohingya issues and what is happening with the ongoing Rohingya issues. And let your friends know about the Rohingya genocide and educate people about this topic. It's really, really important. And in terms of policymakers, I've got 3 call of actions. And my first one is to provide safety to Rohingya children and families in Myanmar and promised safety to repatriation if it occurs. And my second one is to provide access to citizenship, work, and education. And my third one is to understand the intersectionality of issues when it comes to women and to also use that when creating your policies.
Right. Okay, I think we are going to open up the door for the floor for people to start asking questions. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask Noor any question at all, please feel free to raise your hand. I will be unmuting you. I think you can probably unmute yourself as well. Yes, please. Frida?
Yes, hello. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be participating in this program and to listen to the magnificent Rohingya women because, as someone who has been following the Rohingya genocide and feels so concerned about it, I've never had the opportunity to actually have this encounter with Rohingya women activists. So this is wonderful. And I appreciate the questions and Noor's response. My main question is, so taking off from the 3 demands that Noor posed at the end, just a minute ago, so to what extent are those demands being taken seriously by people in the Myanmar uprising? And how hopeful are you about the current Myanmar uprising? What is the level of Rohingya participation in the Myanmar uprising? Could you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, I think.
Thank you so much, Frida.
Thank
you. Go ahead, Noor.
I think the call of action that I've stated is something that we've already heard from other refugee advocates. And I just had to echo that one more time because of the importance of it. And I think there are so many overlaying issues that comes up when we talk about these call of actions. We got permanent members at the United Nations that can just veto a lot of things that we propose in order to help Rohingya lives. So I can only be hopeful for my people in my lifetime, but it's up to the policymakers and it's up to the government. But the people are the most important.
But which governments?
Which governments are?
You said it's up to the government, but which government? In other words, the current, you wouldn't recognize the current military government in Myanmar. I assume you don't, right?
I think it's up to a lot of international governments to also use their voices about the Rohingya crisis, bring it up to the United Nations. It's up to many governments internationally to be able to make these changes. And you can see this example by Gambia a couple of years ago when they brought this up to the High Court.
I think, Frida, there are a lot of currently there are a lot more opportunities now for us to actually collaborate with human rights activists on the ground, as well as democratic movement leaders within Myanmar, in order for our narratives to be listened to, our for us to be able to find our shares in, you know, the democratic movement within the country, whereas it wasn't actually present before because of the resistance, because of the pushbacks. And current narratives is shifting. It is becoming a lot more difficult for people to be racist online. As far as I have seen, at least on the Twitterverse, there are a lot less narratives that revolves around questioning Rohingya as being foreign to Myanmar, Burma, but more of acceptance and embracing. Of course, there are a lot of work for us to continue to do, and advocating for ourselves to be included in all of the tables, in all of the discussions, especially with the national unity government and beyond. It is the kind of work that, you know, because it took a long time for us to get to this position. It's 70 years of propaganda, 70 years of racism, racist narratives, rhetorics that have been circulated. So the undoing of that, and making sure that people unlearn those toxic rhetorics would actually require much more, if not, you know, the similar timeline. So it would be a work that may need to stretch far beyond our lifetime, but it has begun, which is an important monumental step. So as Noor was saying, it is extremely incumbent on the international community to actually not forget that we need the support to uplift our voice even more now, that we have the space, even though it's a tiny space, but we have the space to do those kind of advocacy. So, you know, your support and everyone's support here who have joined us on Zoom and Facebook will be vital to our movement and resisting. Thank you for your question, and the honor is ours for you to join us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any more question at all? Please feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, if there isn't a question, I have a couple more questions actually for Noor. I'd like to ask you about, you know, the experience when you went to Geneva, and you were you know, speaking you know, at the I believe at the Global Refugee event. How was that like? And were there any other Rohingya women who joined you as well on that day? Tell us more about it and what your message was.
So I was part of a team called Gender Audit Team, and our team consists of several refugee women from different refugee communities. And I also had Sister Hafsa that came with me as well, which is another Rohingya sister. So that was fantastic because we were able to collaborate our ideas and also touch base before we were speaking. And also
you were about to go live. Oh, my apologies. My Facebook Live.
We were able to share our speeches and also practice, really. So part of that journey was being trained in our own country before we were going to Geneva on what was going to happen. So what we did was we went to Geneva and we sat down in a lot of the sessions where member states, NGOs and other actors spoke about their pledges. And when it came to gender, women and men, we wrote down what the pledges were and what was mentioned, and we wrote down the time, we wrote down who said it, and we wrote down exactly what they said. And what we did was we turned this into a document for the United Nations in order to hold the several actors accountable for what they're saying. Because a lot of the times actors can say that they're going to do this for women and do this for men and do that, this, and it's usually never really heard of later in the future. So we decided to send this document to the United Nations, and they use this for accountability. And this was part of the gender audit team with UNSW.
My apologies. Right. So what what has changed for you since then? What did you see, and how, how has that affected you in your own advocacy moving forward?
So I saw a lot of different people from refugee communities, and I also learnt a lot from them, and I learnt a lot about advocating, and I saw a lot of different ways how people can advocate. It could be speaking on a panel or having a private discussion or getting interviewed by social media or media. I saw the different tactics of advocacy, and that was something that I learnt throughout Geneva, and this is something that I've been using throughout my whole journey as an advocate. So in Geneva, it was busy and it was tiring. It was a couple of days in the first session, and in the main session in December 2019, it was 4 days. It was 4 a.m. till 7 p.m. days, and we would be inside and talking to policymakers, talking to the media, talking to NGOs and governments, and speaking on panels. So it's quite exhausting, but it's something that a lot of advocates are willing to do in order to make the voices of the communities heard and their community issues.
Well, I'm sure that there are probably a lot more for us to explore about those few days that you've joined, that you've gone to Geneva. Here's another question. If you can tell us, if you would have to narrow it down to one single event, what has changed you to actually start picking up this sort of work? Why did you decide to become an advocate? Why is it so important that a voice like yours is highlighted, and a Rohingya woman stand up and speak about the issues? What was that one event that actually snowballed into all of this that we see?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to mold it into one event, but I can speak about several events in my life where I decided that I needed to use my voice in order to create this change. I had to learn about the Rohingya crisis. I had to learn about my own culture. I was relearning a lot of things. And by that time that I understood the issue, I was just a teenager. I was 13, 14. By this time I was in high school. And when I made my decision to go to university and to be an educator is when I started advocating. I started getting involved in community functions. I started getting involved in women's groups. And I think over that time, it made me realise the privilege that I have that many Rohingya women don't have around the world. And because there's an ongoing genocide, if I sit here and do nothing, that's not going to do anything. So if I can do something, even if it's something little, then be it.
Well, personally, I would like to thank you for being in this space and inspiring myself and many others, I'm sure, of your strength and your courage in doing this work. Now, here's a very, very, it sounds controversial, but I think that if you share this sort of stuff, of course, feel free to not share it at all if you don't feel comfortable. But I feel a lot more validated when I hear a story of how you overcome challenges like, the gender discrimination that happens in this space. Were there any things that have happened in the past that have also, kind of made you feel a little bit down about this sort of work? Were there any challenges that you as a Rohingya woman have had to face?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. There are men in particular that are not going to like the work that you're doing as a woman, and maybe they think that that's their part and that's their role, and there are going to be barriers and issues that are going to come up. People are going to make comments. And in Rohingya, there's a saying that I've heard a lot throughout my life, and maybe you've heard that as well. And
yeah.
That's quite a sexist line, and I've heard that saying a lot when women are using their voices and women are trying to do something that is probably not something that a lot of Rohingya women are trying to do. So these are issues that are going to come up, and gender discrimination is going to come up throughout my life. And I think I've learned to overcome these and to let it go, and also use my support network. You just say, this is going to happen. That's fine. Let's move on.
How do you not let it, affect you, or not internalize some of those things? Do you continuously seek support outside of yourself, or are there any other tips and tricks that you could share with us?
Yeah, you just have to think about it and think, me doing this advocacy work, what are the outcomes? What is it going to achieve? Mm-hmm. And once you think about that, that's going to overcome the, I guess, insecurity that you might feel about what people are going to say about you. You keep reminding yourself about the outcomes, and you keep reminding yourself about why you are doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Yeah, keep the eyes on the prize, right?
Yes.
Are there any other questions at all that would come from those who've joined us here? If you have any question at all, please feel free to unmute yourself. If not, I have a couple more questions for Noor, and then we will move on to our next part of this webinar. Anyone at all? All right, I guess I will have another question for you, Noor. What is your hopes and dreams for Rohingya women? Obviously, we're not trying to just focus on Rohingya women because this is a webinar just for Rohingya women. We're going to actually, need a lot more to uplift our women, our people in general, because when we uplift, women actually do the work to inspire and affect positive changes within their own community as a whole, not just for women. What message and what thoughts do you have for Rohingya women and girls that would be watching today?
Yeah, my thoughts are, if you need to reach out to me, feel free. And
likewise.
If you need to reach out and think about some ways that you can advocate for Rohingya women, I'm always going to be here. You can always reach out to me on my Twitter, and I will reply to you. And I'm hoping that more women are going to be in the forefront of policymakers. We can already see that a lot of our participants are saying that they haven't seen Rohingya women, and this is really nice for them. So that's a prime example of much needed work. And more Rohingya women need to be in the forefront and need to be the voice of policy making.
Right. Are there anything that we could look forward to from you in the next few months in terms of your advocacy?
Not right now. It's locked down where I am.
Oh, right. Right. Okay.
I will update on my Twitter.
Awesome. So I think that we've shared Noor's handle on Twitter, which is at Azizah Edu. It's in our chat box actually. So if you would like, please go and follow her on Twitter, and you can follow more of her work on there. So as Debbie actually just mentioned on this on the chat, it is it's the anniversary of the 888 Uprising, and this dialogue actually symbolizes the importance of you and me, Noor, as sisters, as part of the essential work that the 888 Next Generations would do. So I thank everybody who've joined us today. And I think that we are going to finish this webinar quite soon. But before we end, as Noor has already mentioned, if you don't mind, Noor, can you repeat your call to actions just one more time? Yes, of course. My first one is to provide safety to Rohingya children and families in Myanmar, promise safety to repatriation if it occurs.
And my second one is to provide access to citizenship, work, and education. And my third one is to understand the intersectionality of issues when it comes to women.
Alrighty, so that is Noor's call to action. There are three of them, and they're all related to, the current ongoing struggles that Rohingya refugees and those displaced Rohingya have to face. Now, for my own and for the webinar's call to action, we have actually reached out to an organization called Restless Being, and Restless Being is currently doing an important work on the ground to help with the flood situation. It is an urgent flood response, and let me just quickly share my screen to help direct you to the website, and I'll share that on the chat right now. That this is the current situation. Oops, my apologies. There we go. So this is the urgent flood response that you can go and donate if you would like, and they are going to help as many people as possible. Currently, there are about 23,000 people who have been affected, and 15,000 Rohingya have been displaced because of that flood. So please go to the link and share as much as you can. If you cannot donate, please feel free to share this as widely as you can within your network for people to actually go and donate. It is a really, really important work that Restless Beings is doing. Now, before we end, let me quickly conclude. There is going to be a few more events for the Rohingya Women webinar series. So this is the first, and we are going to be hearing a lot more. We heard a lot today from Noor Azizah, a very, very inspiring Rohingya advocate who has faced many challenges and decided she would resist, and resiliently she has dedicated her life in helping others. This is a very, very common experience among women in all parts of the world, ridden with conflicts and political instability, that we rise to the occasion and resist against the tide of injustices. And as we move along in our conversation, I hope that in our own capacity, we would encourage, support, and rally around, that we would actually rally around these women whose works have been the driving forces of many wonderful social changes. And with that, please stay tuned for next week webinar's registration information. I will be sitting down with two other amazing women who has done wonderful works for the Rohingya community and the Myanmar Burma Society. Let me just share the details of these wonderful speakers that I'll be speaking with. I will be sharing my screen right now. And these are the two women that I will be sitting down with next week. I'm not entirely sure if you can see the screen. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So please mark your calendar. The conversation with Taik Taik, who is a Rohingya researcher, a humanitarian, and human rights advocate, will be taking place on Saturday, August 14th at 11 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. GMT, and 4 p.m. British Summer Time. And with Nandar, I will be having a conversation with her around feminism. She is a feminist activist and founder of the Purple Feminist Groups. She also has a podcast, actually two podcasts in and around the issues of women and gender. That will be taking place on Wednesday, August 18th at 9 a.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. GMT, 8 p.m. Thailand time. More information will be available on my Twitter and will be available on my Facebook as well. My Twitter handle is at Yasmin J. Ullah. It is already on the chat right now. And you can also, follow me on my Facebook, Yasmin Ullah. If there's nothing else for us to address today, Yes, I will definitely share the Facebook Live link. So if there's nothing else today, we will actually move on and bring this session to a close. Thank you very much, Noor, again for spending time with us today. 9 a.m. early on Sunday for Australia. You probably have a lot more things to do, but I really, really appreciate your time and your dedication. I hope whatever you continue to do, we'll obviously keep in touch, but I wish the best for all of your future endeavors, and thank you for being part of this community, and thank you for doing the work to uplift other people's voices. It is extremely, extremely important that we uplift yours and we support you as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Alrighty. We are going to bring this session to a close. I will share the link to the Facebook Live just before we close. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. It has been an extreme pleasure and honor for us to have you all today. And I hope that you join us next week on the 14th with the conversation with Taik Taik. For today, we will, say goodbye, and hopefully, you will continue to follow both of us and join us in our future endeavors, future events, and other advocacy efforts. Thank you again. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.